Welcome to the latest episode of the Undiscovered Metric with me, JJ Haig. Today I'm joined by Amy Lawrence, Associate Director and Head of PR at Ginger May. We sat down to discuss all things PR measurement, and the challenges faced in demonstrating business outcomes. Amy, thank you so much for joining me. Just before we get started, would you mind providing our listeners with just a short background into your role and your career?
Sure, thanks, JJ. So I'm Amy Lawrence, I'm Head of PR at Ginger May, which is a comms agency specialising in B2B technology. And I have to say, we bloody love data. So everything we do, whether it's measuring the success of our client programs, PR programs, social media, or actually how we run internally, so looking at team progression, hiring, working out how to play to each other's strengths and weaknesses, everything is underpinned by data.
As we get into this, the role of sort of PR and comms has changed a little bit over the last few years. I don't know if you agree, but it's no longer just relationships with journalists and placing coverage. It's being on top of all organic communications. It's making sure that the business is joined up with other parts of marketing, with sales, making sure that all of the external organic comms is on brand, essentially. So there's so much content going out from a PR perspective. Are there any sort of metrics that people should really focus at looking at when they're sort of starting out and also sort of becoming more advanced in their PR strategies?
Is there one metric? No. Do they need to work with every department? Yes. But I think before you even start talking about specific metrics, you have to take a step back and think, what am I actually trying to achieve? Because the best thing about PR and social media now is you can literally track and measure everything. But that's also the worst thing about it. You can get way too into the weeds and lose sight of the bigger picture. So whenever we work with a client, we always say, firstly, what's the current state of play? We need a benchmark, because you can't measure anything if you don't have a benchmark in the first place. And secondly, what are you actually trying to achieve? Because that is going to dictate what metrics you use and how you measure success. And there is no one size fits all either. Every company that we work with certainly have varying different objectives, and that can relate to more of your traditional PR ideas around raising awareness of spokespeople and your company and your product offer, but it can be about driving SEO. It can be about attracting investors because you're looking to get funding, or you might be getting acquired. So there is no one size fits all, which is why it's super important to always come back to what is it we're trying to achieve, and then let's find out which metric is going to help us measure how successfully we are or are not doing that.
That seems to be a very big theme throughout these conversations, is people want to look at the data without actually setting those business outcomes and those business KPIs first. Do you think that they need to come from the top down, or do you think they need to be set from the bottom up? Because obviously there's a challenge in both, but if you've got that ambassador at the top and you know you're working towards something, is that something that you see more often now than coming from the PR or the marketing team?
I think everybody has a role to play. You need to have buy-in from the top, 100%. And I've got so many examples of where if people aren't aligned, it just won't work. And the metrics are absolutely meaningless if you don't get everyone on the same page in the first place. One of the things that I actually want to talk to you about, JJ, is vanity metrics versus sanity metrics. And I see this far, far too often. We had a client recently who was absolutely desperate to be in the Wall Street Journal. Whether that was because of an ego thing, it feels pretty damn amazing if you're in the Wall Street Journal. Who doesn't want that? We got them in the Wall Street Journal, but they didn't get any leads. They didn't get any engagement. They were actually really upset because their target audience wasn't reading it. So again, we have that conversation around, well, look at these trade titles. They are quite niche. They might only have 2,000 or 3,000 readers, but if they are the readers who are going to be buying your products or influencing decisions about buying your products, that is so much more valuable. And in that instance, we obviously switched the program, focused on those niche titles, and you can guess what happened. Leads were coming in, the client's happy, we're delivering for them, we're actively contributing towards those objectives. So again, you really have to think about, what am I trying to achieve? How is the best way to do it? And how am I going to measure that?
It's funny, isn't it? Audience and reach always used to be that key metric. The coverage books that people would do, the CEO would want to see that big number. We've reached 500 million people this month with all of our PR coverage. But as you say, if it's not hitting any targets, it's just a massive vanity metric. And I think traditionally, certainly in my experience, PR has struggled with that a little bit. I don't know if that corner's starting to be turned a bit, but certainly even 5-10 years ago, it was still that big vanity metric number.
Absolutely. And as an industry, and speaking as a PR professional, we kind of scuppered ourselves by focusing so much on the wrong metrics. And we didn't necessarily have much choice, but things have certainly evolved for the better. And JJ, I'm sure you'll remember talking a lot about AVE. So advertising value equivalent. If you have a piece of coverage, how much would it have been worth if you paid rate card advertising prices for that same piece of coverage? I mean, I remember having to literally get out a ruler, cut out newspaper clippings, measure the column inches, and figure out how much that would have cost in advertising. Oh, and don't forget, you then have to multiply that by 3, because that's what the PR industry deemed that coverage was worth. Yes, there's merit to that. PR earned media is far more valuable than paying for it, because it's coming from a third party. It's somebody else talking about you and hopefully saying how great you are. But we relied on that for so long, it became meaningless. Yes, it could go up and down, but it didn't mean anything. It didn't inform what you did next. How can you look at an AVE figure and say, oh, I think that's telling me I should change this, or I need to think about this for the next quarter? It doesn't tell you anything.
Yeah, AVE used to be one. I remember one agency had it as 7.5 compared to 3.
And again, that's the other thing. There were so many variations. There was no standardized approach either. It was a little bit like plucking a figure out of the air, but it's what we had at the time, and we put too much emphasis on it.
Do you think now with the new metrics that we have, we can be a lot more agile in adjusting PR strategies a lot quicker than we were traditionally 5-10 years ago?
Yeah, totally. If you're using the insights in the right way. So you could have the best metrics, really in depth, really insightful, but if you're not looking at them and using them to decide what to do next, again, it becomes meaningless. And I've seen some really great examples of different ways to measure the outcome of PR. So, for example, we worked with a company that had a way to look at each individual piece of coverage. So this is in addition to looking at things like audience reach, job titles of who's reading it, impressions, all of those things. But they then took it a step further, and it was like, okay, so we've got this piece of coverage. Where in the piece were we mentioned? Were we in the top third, the second third? Was it near the end? Did the piece of coverage also mention our competitors? Again, where were they in relation to us? Were we first that was mentioned, or were we last? Was it positive? Was it negative? And then you get a score. So out of 100, where does that article score? The trouble is, the company was so set on the numbers. It was, let's say we're setting a target of 500 every month. The only way to actually get that volume was to take a bit of a spray and pray approach, get out as much content as possible, which was typically press releases about non-newsworthy announcements or product updates that was hitting low to mid-tier coverage, didn't meet the company objectives. It was such a distraction. So at some point you just have to remember, why are we doing this? And as with everything in life, it's all about balance. You need to get the right metrics, get the right level of metrics, and make sure you're using them. That is what it's about. If you're not doing that, it doesn't work.
What would you say now are those key metrics? We've moved away from AVE. I think the other thing that we're starting to move away from, personally, I think is a good thing, is measuring PR success on backlinks, because actually publications aren't willing to provide those backlinks because data is so important to everyone now. So what are those sort of key metrics that people should be focusing on?
So I think one of the key metrics that we use is looking at share of voice. So this is a really great one because instantly, in a split second, you can look at a graph and you instantly know where your company sits against your competitors. It looks great, everyone understands it. However, you do need to have alongside that and the analysis that goes with it. Okay, so you're getting 60% share of voice. That sounds pretty good. But what publications are you in? What are the messages that are going out? But also, really importantly, and I think this is something that possibly gets overlooked, is let's not just look at yourselves, look at your competitors. Where are your competitors getting mentions? What kind of coverage are they getting? Is it positive? Is it negative? What are they saying that's different to what you offer as a company and what you can do? So it's a bit of a gap analysis as well. Where's the opportunity? Should you be copying what they're doing? Maybe to an extent, but what can you do that they're not doing? So again, it's share of voice is a brilliant instant indicator of what's happening. Couple that with the insights that go with it, that's really powerful.
So now you've got your share of voice in place, how can you then demonstrate the business value of that share of voice once you've done that gap analysis against your competitors? Is it linking things to CRM data? Is it linking things to demos and sale leads? We've touched upon backlinks as well, which I know a lot of people still want to see, but is fading away a little bit. How do you then demonstrate that business value to those business leaders that have set the KPIs who may not necessarily be in the marketing team?
So ideal scenario is you are linked into every department, you have oversight of everything that could be directly or indirectly attributed to the content that you're pushing out, whether that is on owned channels, through editorial, whether you're doing marketing campaigns, all of those things. In an ideal world, everything is joined up. One of the best questions, but also one of the hardest questions, is where did you hear about us? That is so powerful, and that instantly gives you an idea of what's working and what's not. But that is something that's really hard to capture, and you're reliant, and it normally comes out of a conversation rather than any sort of data capture form or audience insights or anything like that. When we get that feedback from clients, it's absolute gold dust. We had a client who had some press release coverage in a marketing trade publication. The day it went up, they received 2 inquiries from some really big, well-known brands saying, off the back of this, can we talk to you? That could convert into hundreds of thousands of revenue for that company. But you're reliant on them hearing directly from the person who contacted them, that's why they're reaching out. Secondly, you're reliant on them relaying it back to, in this case, the PR agency who put the piece in that publication. So there is a real kind of void there. So ideal scenario is you have access to all that information. Ideal scenario is you have enough resource, time, and budget to have all of that data as well. And this is again where I go back to balance. We could spend all of our time for clients literally just looking at numbers and metrics and insights, but we won't have any time to do PR. So again, you've got to make that judgment call. Ideally, when you start working with a client, you can do a perception awareness study. You go out to the market, you find out what people know about you, what they think about you, and you revisit that every 3 to 6 months. The reality is there isn't the time and budget to be doing that kind of activity. So again, it's about balance. It's having enough data to make what you're doing, to understand whether it's rigorous, whether it's successful, where you can make improvements, but not at the expense of what you actually set out to achieve in the first place.
I totally agree with you. And I think one of the challenges PR has is, unlike paid, unlike organic social, you're not in control actually of some of the metrics and the data. And I think with digital PR, it's got better, but actually we're still beholden on audience size from the publications, audience readership and things like that to do all of this analysis. And how can we overcome that challenge a little bit when we're marrying this up with organic social data, marketing data on your website, sort of web traffic and stuff? How can you marry up those metrics a little bit to still highlight that PR is still a key part of your marketing function?
It's, again, it's all about connecting the dots. I think it's communication, it's transparency, it's building trust as well. How often do we talk about working in silos? It still happens, but the most successful programs that we run are when we're really working in partnership with our clients. And that's not just with the marketing teams, it's with the C-suite, it's with the sales teams, it's working with field marketing as well. It's making sure that we have insight into everything.
And then looking out for someone that's starting this journey out, they've just started sort of to bring a PR agency on board. What are the three things that they can really do immediately to highlight budget? Because I think one of the challenges we see is companies either get PR because their competitors have got PR and they feel that they're being told that they need it, but there's not the buy-in from above. Or actually they've got all this budget, struggle to demonstrate the value, and then 6 months later, someone in the team says, oh, well, can't really see much value in PR. Why don't we just put it all towards paid? So what are the three sort of metrics or things that someone can do to really just drive that value at the beginning?
At the start of every program, we talked about this, JJ, getting buy-in from the top is really important from the start. And actually, one of the things that I personally find most challenging and most rewarding is working with a company that's had a really bad experience with PR. I love that challenge because actually we pride ourselves on coming into a situation like that and saying, let us show you how it should work. So building that trust is really paramount. And obviously that's from us with the company, but also internally, they need to have built that. Everything comes back to trust. Relationships are really important. So that's definitely a priority. Secondly, it's about being able to showcase why you're doing something. Again, what you're trying to achieve. How does what we're brought on to do for your company directly link back to your company's commercial objectives? How is it going to affect the bottom line? How does it plug into everything else that's happening? This is not just let's do PR over here in this box and let's do something else over here. This is how does it plug into absolutely everything. You touched on things like backlinks and SEO. That's a great example. We're doing so many LinkedIn campaigns now for our clients, and just making sure that the content in that includes the SEO keywords, which links back to the website, which links back to the content we push out for PR and in marketing collateral. Everything needs to work together. So that's also really important. Third thing, what would be my advice? Transparency. So once you've set the objectives, you know why we're here and what we're set out to achieve. It's just being really transparent about how that's progressing. We know things sometimes don't go to plan. So having the flexibility built in, being transparent with clients about, okay, well, we've done this, that didn't quite work. So let's revisit the angle. Let's talk to another thought leader about why this is important. What are we missing? Let's talk to the journalists. And I think just that whole way of working, and it literally goes across everything, that makes the big difference. And that's how we prefer to work. And as I kind of alluded to at the start, we love data. Everything we do is driven by data. So we're not just sit there making things up, thinking, oh, let's try this. We're basing it on just a hunch or something. Everything we do is based on data. We know what journalists want. We know what they're writing about. We know what's newsworthy. So we're using that information all the time. We're not just sit here saying it for our own good. Everything we suggest, everything we recommend is always based on some level of data and experience and insights, whether that's just from years of experience or whether it's because we just had a conversation with a journalist yesterday. So we know what they want.
I think that data-driven PR is really important. I think traditionally PR has had a little bit of an image problem at times. And I'd also say that, ironically, we're probably one of the worst industries for communicating within a business because we've never had that data. But this approach and this data approach that you guys lead and we at Verity see the benefits of it on a daily basis is really important. Just touching again on that share of voice metric a little bit. How can people sort of firstly identify what they want to measure in share of voice and who are the key people that they should be measuring against? Because there's no point as a small company going, we're gonna just measure share of voice against Google or Nike or or Apple, because it's never going to have those impacts. So how can they set up that metric to really get the best out of it?
I guess it's really understanding your competitor set and knowing who you are competing with on a day-to-day basis. And yeah, we do have clients who are monitoring the bigger companies for sure, but obviously it's a small part of that bigger company. So again, it's being really specific at the outset. It's why are you measuring against this company? Because you can measure against Google. I mean, Google is a nightmare to track against for obvious reasons. That's your worst case scenario. But why? What is that going to tell you? Why not focus on those that are more kind of like for like company size, who are going after the same clients as you? Who are you going to be competing with at a pitch? Really focus in on that and build from there. Because again, you need to make sure the metrics are going to help you, not just be a number that means nothing, that could really demotivate everybody. If you're measuring against Google, like, come on, you're never gonna win that battle. So again, why are you doing it? What are you trying to achieve, and how's it going to help you?
And just moving into those sort of trends a little bit, looking at the markets, obviously you're having a lot of conversations with journalists. What are the three sort of things that you expect are going to catch fire over the next sort of 12, 18 months? Obviously, there's a lot of stuff going on. The industry's recovering from COVID. We're moving into unforeseen economic situations. So what are the things that people really should be aware of and potentially prioritizing?
Yeah, I mean, the word of the year last year, was it permacrisis? I mean, that is how it feels. There's constantly something going on. We're constantly switching. But actually, I think that means everyone's got to be more nimble and got to be more agile. There's always something happening. Making sure that you're prepared is really important. I mean, there's things like AI. Chat GPT obviously is a massive topic of conversation, and I think everyone's trying to figure out how is that going to work. We talk a lot about, data and automation versus the human input. Human curation of insights is massively important. You always need that layer. So that's a big topic at the minute. In terms of metrics, I think so. A piece I was reading recently talked about minimalism in metrics. So kind of going against where we've been is we've got all these metrics. There's so many things we can measure. This is great. Finally, PR has data. But actually, it goes back to, well, what's most helpful? So there is a talk around kind of minimalism in metrics, choosing what's most effective, what's going to resonate the most, but also being prepared to review that. Things change. We know they change. So you have to evolve as well. You can't just say, right, that's what we're doing, done. I'm not going to look at it for 3 more years. You might have to change it every quarter. It changes that much. And your business priorities change. So again, you need to make sure it comes back to objectives. Is your objective moved on? Did you complete your objective? Have you got a new objective? How do you measure that? It might not be in the same way. So it's just constantly that kind of test and learn, evaluate. That's really, really important. And that goes across everything, not just PR and metrics, but business as well.
And do you think there's lessons that PR can still learn from organic marketing and actually some paid marketing, with the availability of how they're looking at metrics almost on a daily basis to shape and shift and inform that we're not doing yet?
Yeah, I think so. And look, paid content is really important. PR is changing. There's a lot more pay to play opportunities than earned now. So I think it's really important to have that integrated comms approach. We talk about PASO, paid, earned, social and owned, and you do need to look at it as a whole. Again, you can't just separate those things. They overlap massively. I still find it frustrating. I had an instance where I asked a publication to tell me how much reach a particular package received that they were offering, and they couldn't tell me. And it's that just blows my mind, because I'm thinking, well, we're going to pay for this service, but you can't tell me who's receiving it. We have access to data even at a basic level. So yeah, there's learnings from all sides always. But yeah, integrated communication is definitely really important. I think having a stake in all of those areas is what is going to be most successful.
And that goes back to those relationships between different departments, different teams, and having those champions across the business. Are there any sort of pieces of advice you would want to give to your younger self, someone starting in the industry, or something you wish you'd known earlier in your career?
Yes. So something that I always say to my team is ask for feedback. And it's something that, especially when you're starting out, it's the scariest thing to do, because you don't want anyone to tell you you're doing a bad job. But it's the most valuable thing that you can do. And don't just ask for it once a year. Don't wait for a yearly appraisal. Ask every single day after every task you complete. How did I do? What could I have done better? Essentially, you are gathering data about your performance. So I should have done it earlier. I encourage the team to do it, but also reciprocate, give feedback to others, because it's so, so valuable. And there's a lot of fear around giving feedback, but actually people want it, they appreciate it. If it's perhaps more constructive or even negative, it's still super valuable. In fact, that's more valuable than just, well done, you did a great job. That is super important as well. But actually, it's that constructive feedback that is going to help you progress in whatever career you're working in, whoever you're working with. So always ask for feedback.
And it seems that we've touched upon a theme that I think we've been speaking out throughout this whole conversation is it's analysing the why rather than just the what.
100%.
Amy, thank you so much for your time.
Good to speak to you.